Hey, what is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today, this is a bit of a difficult video for me because I decided to do my top 5 X-Men Omnibus, and if you know this channel, you know me at all, I'm a huge X-Men fan, so narrowing it down to 5 omnibuses that I think are sort of the quintessential X-Men omnibuses that I own, it was a torturous task to say the least, and I feel like I'm slighting some of the books that I left out, but this is the list, folks, so please enjoy. Alright, and just so you know what I'm working with, here is my omnibus collection. There are X-Men and X-Men related omnibuses all over the place, so I'm just kind of showcasing it all. Also, there's like a lot of gaps and stuff right now because I'm actually moving, so I've started, sort of packing things up. So if the shelf doesn't look as neat as it usually does, that is why. Alright, starting us off is the New X-Men by Grant Morrison. Now, this is the first X-Men omnibus that I ever got, and that's mostly why it's on my list. It was my gateway into the wonderful world of X-Men, and in this book I fell in love with the character of Emma Frost, who is my favorite X-Men. Her secondary mutation comes into play here too, that's where she gets her diamond skinned. I always also really enjoyed the characterization of Jean Grey in this, and I wish they would explore the more amoral, godlike side of her more often like it's done here. This book does suffer from some early 2000s edginess that a lot of comics around this time suffered from, but it's still great overall. It's very school-focused, very trauma-focused, and very mutant rights focused, and I think it's a great starting point for anybody who is sort of interested in getting into the X-Men, and especially anybody who's interested in looking to get to know some of those more iconic X-Men characters in a modern setting. There's also a lot of iconic plot lines in here, like the Genosis stuff, like the Cerebra, and, Charles Xavier's twin sister stuff, Zorn stuff, all of that is in here, and I think we get Phantom X's first appearance in here as well, so there's just like a lot to dive in here. It's a great omnibus to start your X-Men journey. And by the way, it was too hard for me to actually rank these in a particular order, so these are my top 5, but they are not, in specific slots like 1 through 5. Next up, we have the Excalibur Omnibus, and if you're a regular on this channel, you know that this is one of my favorite X-Men books. It is an X-Men spin-off title from when the X-Men were presumed dead, and Nightcrawler and Kitty Pryde crossed the pond to Europe, and through some wild circumstances joined up with Rachel Summers, who is coming from another dimension, because that's the whole thing, but there was like a Mojoverse thing that never happened, and they just kind of ended up putting her just in this instead, and then never covered the Mojoverse stuff, but that is a complete non sequitur. It's her, Captain Britain, and Megan, and they all form this new team with the goal to carry on the dream of the X-Men and to not let it die just because they're dead. And this was a blind buy for me, and I'm so glad I bought it because it is absolutely phenomenal. Not only is it incredibly fun and funny at times, but it's also this wonderful examination of grief and finding your own identity, and we also get a lot of romantic tension and promiscuous moments in here, which is always nice. I mean, it basically covers everything you could want in a good mutant story. Plus, I've said it before and I will continue to say it, everyone, and I mean everyone in here is written really, really well, but this is the best I think Rachel Summers has ever been written still to this day. Her voice of a traumatized, guilt-ridden survivor just trying to do better but not necessarily knowing how is captured wonderfully. We also have Megan in here, who's a favorite character of mine from this. She's an empathic shapeshifter, and they have a lot of fun with that within the medium, and I wish they would use her more often in modern days, but at least we have this. And like I said, there's some great romantic tension with her and Nightcrawler, as there's kind of this love triangle with her, him, and Captain Britain. There's a multiversal travel storyline in here. There's aliens. There's literally something for everybody, so do yourself a favor and pick this one up. Okay, next up we have the X-Men by Chris Claremont and Jim Lee Omnibus, Volume 1. I actually prefer Volume 1. I know a lot of people prefer Volume 2, and it's got, the best-selling X-Men comic of all time, and maybe comic of all time in that one, but I just like the storylines better in this one. It's a really fun era of X-Men that I think is also pretty accessible for newcomers. There's a lot of iconic stuff in here too. The X-Men are in the Outback, which is a short-lived but really lively time in X-Men history in my opinion. Wolverine. We also get the first appearance of one of my favorite characters, Jubilee, in here too, who slowly becomes a pretty key player during this part of the run, as she ends up helping save Wolverine when, he's in trouble and not kidnapped, sort of tied up for some bad dudes. And after that, they go on their own mini quest, and they're eventually joined by Psylocke, who, this is also where she has her notorious metamorphosis into Quinon's body, because most of the X-Men walk through the Siege Perilous in here, and that's a really interesting thing that happens. And, they each have their own storylines associated with that, and it just so happens that Psylocke's was the Quinon metamorphosis. This is just full of what I love in the X-Men. It's got tons of character dynamic stuff, tons of dialogue, and we still get awesome action that we love to see, but it's the relationships that really does it for me when it comes to the X-Men books. And the Muir Island stuff starts taking root here too, which is, I think, followed up in the second omnibus, but we still get the good Zaladane stuff in here. Guys, this is just a lot of awesome storylines and moments in here that I think makes it absolutely worth picking up, and it's not an easy time for our characters, but it's still a lot of fun, and it's not completely depressing like it can be sometimes when our characters are just hit with traumatic event after traumatic event. I highly recommend this one, and the artwork is also a joy to look at. Next up, we have another one of my favorite X-Men spin-off titles, which is also a book that takes place because the X-Men are presumed dead or missing or whatever it is at this time. I think we get a lot of great content when the X-Men are sort of out of the picture. Not that I don't like the X-Men, but when they're gone, there's a void that needs to be filled, and it's always filled with greatness. Anyway, we get the New Mutants here, which is Charles Xavier's new team of mutants, where he's decided to change his approach a little bit, and he's not necessarily going to, create like a paramilitary group of students. But, of course it's a comic book, so they end up having to fight a lot. Really, I just think the cast of characters in this book is really fantastic. I talk about it a lot on my channel, but I think it's amazing that Claremont was able to sort of have such a diverse group, and then they each have their own like little ideological evolutions that happens throughout the course of the series. So we get to see like these teenagers, or even younger than teenagers in some instances, we get to see them grow into, grow into the heroes that they really are, grow into the compassionate, thoughtful, smart, intelligent, strong souls that they are. And I love seeing them, and I love sort of like getting to view this series through the lens of these teenagers who are just dealing with all sorts of problems in their own personal lives. They're dealing with their own relationships, those dynamics, and then they also have to deal with being part of a marginalized group in this Marvel world that is being a mutant, and making sure that they learn how to handle their powers safely and all of that. This also features one of my favorite mini-stories of all time, which I've done a video on as well, but it's the Magic mini-series where, we get to sort of learn what happened to Ilyana Rasputin when she was sucked into limbo, and sort of the shift and the changes that she had to deal with as she lost years of her life there, and learned dark sorcery, and maybe lost a bit of her soul there too. And then she has to come back and, figure out how she's going to work with this group dynamic of the New Mutants when she has had such a vastly different life experience than they have. And I just think there's a lot of really beautiful, wonderful, nuanced things explored in this story, and I really recommend this one to anyone. I think it is one of the best X-Men spin-off series. And of course, I have to have on this list the Uncanny XMen Omnibus Volume 1 by Chris Claremont. This is when a young writer named Chris Claremont took over the X-Men way back in 1976. They introduced this new X-Men team that was more of a internationally sort of extrapolated team, and they just gave us these heartfelt storylines. They gave us this jaw-dropping action. They gave us characters with a lot of life to them, characters whose dynamics work so well together, all working together to fight against prejudice, intolerance, and everything like that. And it worked so wonderfully. It revitalized the X-Men series, and I don't know, any fan of the X-Men should read this at some point, because if you're not, what are you doing? I mean, it's older stuff for sure, but to me, this aged like fine wine. It is incredibly, incredibly important as well when it comes to X-Men lore. And a lot of the X-Men books now still are building off stuff that was initially put into this book and in this run. So, I mean, as far as an older comic goes, guys, this one really, really kicks butt. And you need to read it. I mean, you need to. I hate to say you need to do something, but you need to. Plus, all the iconic stuff that is in here. I mean, like Dark Phoenix stuff, like I said, the new team, the X-Men versus the X-Men, Krakoa, tons of stuff. But alright guys, thank you for just letting me ramble on and on about X-Men. You guys are so generous to always let me do that because I seem to have made a habit of it. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, and I will catch you in the next one. You guys have a great rest of your day. And, by the way, let me know what your favorite X-Men omnibuses are.